everybody, I hope you're all doing well. 9.5, the new big patch comes out tomorrow, or maybe it came out today, depending on when you're watching this video. And because of that, I wanted to wait to do the next A to Z video because I wanted to do Oposh on the next patch because I think he'd be pretty fun, especially with the build that I have in mind. And because of that, I kind of just wanted to make a little guide video for you guys to prepare you guys for the 9.5 patch, because we've been playing scrims on this patch, done a little bit of PTS. To be fair, I haven't played too much PTS just because I've been sick, but like in general, I do know a lot about this patch, especially because we're gonna be playing on that in Masters tournament. So it is literally my job to know what to do on this patch. And I know a lot of people are wondering what's going to be meta and, you know, what all the changes mean and all that. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys everything that you need to know going into 9.5, whether that's tomorrow or today. So yeah, we're just going to get right into it and try and speed run everything. First, we're going to talk about solo lane. That is my role. So there's a lot of changes to solo lane. Basically, what you need to know is that the warrior class is not going to be very good, especially on this first 9.5 patch. I'm pretty sure that this class is basically dead, and there's a lot of reasons for this. Number one, this class has been getting nerfed nonstop over the recent patches. For example, the shield tree, this entire tree is just, it's just horrible now. And they even nerfed void shield, the item that was never bought. It was no longer good, and it's gotten nerfed again. So yeah, this entire tree is dead. They've nerfed the sovereignty tree as well. This entire tree, mystical mail, I mean, it literally gives you 35 procs for 24.50 gold. That is just not very valuable. They've even nerfed this tree a bunch. Basically, every bruiser item in the game has gotten nerfed. And that's okay. If those were the only changes to these characters, I'd be fine with that. Don't get me wrong. I think that would even make them pretty balanced, but it's just a combination of all the changes. All of the changes are all direct nerfs to the warrior class and just the bruiser class, or just tank class in general, at least tanks that want to be threatening to the enemy backline. I mean, we've nerfed all items, we've buffed base procs and health, and a lot of people get the wrong idea. They think that a buff to base procs and health is actually good for tank players, but it's actually much worse for them, because if the carries have higher base procs and health, if you're not building damage items, you're not going to threaten them at all. I mean, just think about it. Whenever you're in the early game and you have your breastplate online and you walk in an enemy ADC, or at least before this patch, you actually were kind of threatening to them. But once they get their damaged items online, they can actually, you know, shred through those procs and kind of take you down late game. But now, if you go breastplate first item and they have higher base procs early game, you do no damage to them. And then when you get to the late game, when they have their shredding items online anyway, they're going to actually, you know, be able to kill you. So that window where you can actually abuse the strengths of being a warrior and take advantage of being super strong is actually going to be much smaller now, especially with the fact that it's going to go late game in pretty much all of your games, just because of all the changes to curb snowball and the fact that it's going to be really hard to siege and everything in all of your casual games. So it's just going to be pretty hard to take advantage of being a warrior at all. Not to mention the fact that everything on the map is tankier, the waves are tankier, the camps are tankier. So if you're building tank items, you just really cannot farm at all. Obviously, you can kill the buffs, it just takes a little bit longer than it does in the previous patch. And if somebody is building damage on the enemy team, let's say you're playing against a damage dealer solo lane, they're just gonna be able to hyper farm really well. They're gonna be killing the camps, they're gonna be one-shotting the wave, and while they're just one-shotting the wave and walking to the jungle and farming or rotating, you're gonna be busy trying to actually clear the minions just because they're so tanky, and same thing applies to the jungle buffs as well. So, and you know, the fact that they haven't nerfed the ADC items going into this patch as well, I mean, most tank items have been receiving lots of nerfs going into this patch and the past few patches, but hunter items really haven't seen much changes at all recently. I think maybe Aussie lost a little bit of lifesteal, and other than that, maybe there was one other change. I can't really think of it at the top of my head. But the point is, ADC items really haven't seen any changes recently. This Kin's crit build that people have been going is still very, very strong. I mean, it's really strong in the 9.4 patch, and it's only getting stronger on 9.5 just because crit's really good at PvEing. The environment's a lot tankier. You know, late game, they still shred people even if they have a lot of protections. And of course, if these items don't really see any changes going into this patch, whereas all the tank items get a lot of nerfs, then obviously there's some discrepancy there. So yeah, all those reasons combined, especially with the fact that it's likely to go into that late stage of the game, and warriors are mainly known for their mid-game dominance, especially on this patch. They're no longer going to be able to solo carries in the late game at all, or even win 1v1s against carries. Because of all that, I think the warrior class, and especially the bruiser guardian class as well, the same thing applies to them. Imagine trying to clear a wave or a blue buff as a Cthulhu on this new patch. It's just rough. I will say that magical characters, I think, didn't get nerfed as much as the warrior class, just because their items didn't get as nerfed as the bruiser trees have been over the past few patches. You know, obviously stuff like Jade Crown is still really strong right now. You know, even though it did get a bit of a nerf, it's still very strong. Good base stats, good passive for the late game, which is what you're going to get to in most of your games. So yeah, Guardians, Warriors class in general and solo pretty much dead on 9.5's release. So that means that there needs to be a replacement for them, and the replacement I think is going to be damage dealers and utility characters. What do I mean by damage dealers? I actually, as crazy as this sounds, and I know people are going to be a little bit stunned and maybe confused when they start seeing this in their casual games and stuff, but hunters, damage dealing mages, and damage dealing assassins, and the likelihood that you're going to play be playing all these characters is very, very high, and also the likelihood that you're going to be building stuff like Boombas and Eye of the Jungle is very high, just because the camps are all tanky, and if you build this item, and the fact that it's really hard to punish you in the early game just because you're a lot tankier in lane, it's going to be really hard to kill each other. You can just hyper farm, and if the enemy soul laner doesn't have one of these items or isn't playing a damage dealer, they're not going to be able to keep up with you. And because PvEing is actually really important now, because Fire Giant and Gold Fury are really hard to kill, structures are really hard to kill, it's actually really nice having this this fourth damage dealer on your team. So assassins, mages, and even hunters. I did say utility type characters as well, because I do think you can actually still build a bit bruiser on especially mages. Characters like Hades, Baron Samedi, Hell, Afro, because these characters actually keep your hunter and your mage alive in late game much longer than they would otherwise, because you're not playing like a diving character who's running to the enemy backline. You're going to be peeling for them on these characters, especially if you can get a Boombas. Like if you go like a Boombas Baron Samedi or a Boombas Hades late game, the payoff is actually there because those characters are quite strong late game with the Boombas, and you can still build a bruiser on them, like maybe like throwing a Spirit Robe, a Warlock Sash, Ethereal, stuff like that. It's going to make you a little bit tankier, allow you to frontline a little bit more, and maybe initiate and tank objectives for your team, while also still being threatening because you do need that damage on this patch. So characters like that I think are going to see a lot more viability in the soul lane. Apart from soul lane, mid lane and jungle are actually still going to be pretty similar to 9.4. Obviously, there's a lot of changes, and I think the God viability is going to change up a little bit here and there. But I think, in jungle, Daji is still going to be really good. Fenrir is still going to be really good. If you're, stuff like Kali is actually going to be a little bit better just because you're more than likely going to get to that late game, and Kali's obviously really strong then. But things that you probably won't be seeing as much are like bruiser characters like Osiris, even Gilgamesh. He's received so many nerfs recently. He even got nerfed in this patch. I mean, we talk about it all the time. This is one of the most nerfed characters in the history of Smite, but even a character like Gilgamesh is actually going to be not seen as much just because his bruiser build is not going to be nearly as good. Because if you build bruiser, you don't build full damage. Like I said, you are not threatening enough on anybody on the map because of the higher base procs and higher health. You just don't do enough damage to them, and their damage builds will actually outscale you really, really hard. So something to keep in mind. Supports are kind of in the same boat as solo, where you can't really be playing any characters that are supposed to be threatening on the enemy backline just because you won't be threatening anymore to them. Characters that really rely on their damage to be useful, stuff like Ares or Bacchus. I mean, you can still see Ares just because he can force speeds, but Serb, for example, especially Cthulhu, going back to the soul lane, these characters rely on their damage to threaten the enemy backline to either get kills or, force fights for their team. These characters are going to be a lot less viable going into the next patch. You probably want to be playing characters that have a lot more utility and stuff that can kind of just disrupt the enemy backline and not really die that easily. So even something like Kumba is going to be seeing more play, I think. Also, because it's so hard to kill supports in the early game, you can get away with going low mobility characters. Something like Ymir is actually going to be a lot better next patch just because, I mean, he's already pretty hard to kill and he's going to be harder to kill, and you can't really punish the fact that he can't get away a lot of the time. So, yep. That's where supports kind of are. And then, of course, ADC is in a very strong spot right now. Every single game, basically every single game, you want to be playing a crit hunter in this role, and you want to be going Gilded Arrow. Gilded Arrow is in a very strong spot right now. Obviously, did not get nerfed going into this patch, and it did get nerfed recently, but still 20 flat basic attack damage is strong on every crit hunter you want to be playing. It also gives you gold, and because you're just going to be farming until that late game, it's just such a high amount of extra gold you're going to be getting, and then of course you can go into that diamond arrow or that ornate arrow if you want extra crit chance. But both upgrades are very strong, and it's just a perfect fit for a late game meta, especially when ADCs are in such a strong spot. So yeah, you're going to be going gilded. You're going dev gloves so that you can go into this crit kins build. Actually, a lot of times you can actually just go kins right here. Then you're going to be going into the wind demon, into the silver branch. You need that percent pen. You're definitely going to need that into the Deathbringer. This is basically the build you go every single game. Of course, upgrade your Gilded Arrow into Ornate or into Diamond. I actually think Diamond is better a lot of the time, even though the other one gives you crit chance. This just gives you 80 flat basic attack damage, and it can also give you up to 60% attack speed, which is insane, especially if you have Silver Branch and you're playing a character that has a stim, which you probably should be right now, just because characters with stims and crit kins builds are very, very strong, especially with Silver Branch. So yeah, ADCs are in a pretty good spot. They're pretty straightforward. Just kind of build this every single game. Play a crit hunter in ADC every single game. If you wonder what I mean by crit hunter, just characters that don't really want to rely on their abilities. So stuff like Rama, Heim, Cernanos, Churn. You know, you don't really want to be playing characters like Scotty or Chiron, or maybe, I mean, you can go a crit build on Uller, but he's going to go probably like a Transcendence into a Hydra's instead, and then probably go into crit. That's actually not too bad on him. Something like this. So you can go that route with him, just so you can abuse the early game ability damage that you have on Uller. Jingwei is probably the best character in the game in the next patch, and she could probably be played in all 3 damage dealing roles, or all 4 damage dealing roles. You could probably even play her in jungle, but she's probably, not probably, she definitely is the best ADC in the next patch, so that's something to keep in mind. She's definitely a good ban to be banning in ranked, especially if you don't want to be playing against that, which I definitely don't want to. So yeah, definitely look to ban her. So objectives are extremely hard to do now. So they're very easy to contest and also require a lot of resources to actually do. So don't be afraid to like farm and split push while the enemy team is like super hyper focused on an objective, especially like Gold Fury. If they're all 5 there and they're really trying to look for a fight so they can get kills and snowball a game, don't be afraid to just go farm and kind of give that to them, because it'll balance out and you probably won't even get that far behind in gold, especially if you're not giving up kills. And that brings me to my next point, is that most of your games are going to go to the late game, as long as you just farm and don't intentionally feed them with kills, because in Smite, in general, in the past, and definitely right now, in order to snowball, it really relies on kills, and it's really hard to die in this 9.5 patch unless you're really playing horribly, just because of all the increased base procs and health and everything like that. So kind of just farm. I mean, it's basically a PvE game right now. So make sure you farm, try and get to your late game build, and if you have a stronger comp, you have more damage dealers, and you don't intentionally feed them, like I said, then you're going to get to the late game and you're going to be really strong regardless. Also, with that being said, sieging is very difficult, so try to employ some strategies to help, like such as split pushing. Say the jungler and the soul laner go into a lane and they split push with a minion wave. Somebody has to go defend that. You can split up the enemy team and kind of, you know, ruin their comms or their defensive strategy. You can use the Trebuchet. I think Trebuchet is actually pretty good, especially late game, and it's getting buff, or basically a fix going into this patch. It's going to be very, very strong for that, so don't be afraid to try and go for those cups and use the Trebuchet when you're sieging. It can be very, very helpful. And build Emperor's Armor. I mean, Emperor's Armor might be the single best physical defense item in the game, which is just such a troll thing to say. It's been nerfed so many times over, or not nerfed, buffed so many times over the years, and it's finally going to be viable just because structures are in the most insane spot they've ever been. And this item, just its base stats alone, are better than a lot of the other physical defense items in the game. And it's only 2,000 gold, so it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm not going to question it. Just build Emperor's Armor in most of your games, especially if you're a support player. In fact, probably only in support, because that's basically the only role where you're going to be building full tank items now, I think, at least for the time being, until further changes to 9.5. So yeah, Emperor's Armor is definitely another thing that should help you with your sieges, which are going to be difficult. As far as map play goes, guys, the cups, they've actually replaced the flowers. So now on this next patch 9.5, there's going to be cups. All the camps are basically just one shot. You walk up and auto them or use an ability on them, and funny enough, you can use ability on them even though they're so squishy. So like if you're playing dodge, you can actually 3 to the little minion and they'll just get insta-killed. But anyway, just something to keep in mind. They are one shot. You just walk up, kill it, grab the cup, and it takes more than one rotation of all the cups on the map to get a full obelisk. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, they've replaced the flowers. So instead of having flowers that give you this little obelisk, this little scepter that does damage to everybody around you, heals your towers, heals your minions, instead of that, you can now get a trebuchet, which is this big catapult thing that pushes down lanes. Think of it like a siege juggernaut, and helps you push towers and structures, especially because sieging is going to be a lot more difficult on this patch. So it's nice to have. It is definitely useful, especially late game. But the important thing as far as map play goes is that the cups spawn at 6 minutes, and they're very easy to get, like I said. So if your opponents aren't ready for them at that time, you can just walk up, insta-kill them, and grab the cup and walk away. And a lot of people will not be ready for it, because most casual players won't realize that they're going to be spawning at 6 minutes on the dot, especially because flowers spawn at 4 minutes before. So that's something that you can take advantage of, especially in the early days of ranked on this new patch. And they're just really good to start getting a lead and help unlock those sieges that are going to be a lot more difficult. So they spawn at your phoenixes, and you can actually choose when to send them. You can have multiple on the map at a time. So if you get 2 of these trebuchets and you already had one from before and you never sent it, because all you have to do to send it is just walk into the little circle in the phoenix, and it'll start pushing down the lane. You can actually send multiple at a time. This can help unlock some map play for you as far as sieging and split pushing and stuff like that. Also, a lot of people have been saying that items like Kin Size and Soul Reaver are going to be a must buy on this new patch just because they got mega buffed by the changes to all the HP pools and everything. But I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret here. Those items were already a must buy on the previous patch, and they do get a slight buff going into this patch, but it's not like anything monumental. But you're still going to be buying them, yes. One item that I think maybe will be purchased more and maybe even earlier in builds is Heartseeker, just because it will allow assassins in the jungle to actually be threatening to those carries even early on in the game, just because it also provides that 10% pen, which is also going to be more valuable with more pots in the game. So yeah, that's one thing I do think will get some more value for sure, and maybe be a must buy in the jungle. And last but certainly not least is that the Titan is very tanky now, so you have to be very careful with your end calls. You know, if somebody's respawning soon and they're actually going to be threatening to your backline, like let's say it's a damage dealer or like a crit hunter, and you have 4 people and the Titan is full HP, it's going to be kind of hard. You're probably going to have to try and kill that that ADC before you try and end the game. The Titan has so much HP. But like I said, if you do have those 4 damage dealers, it's going to be a lot easier to siege and kill that Titan. So that's something to keep in mind, but it's going to be very, very tanky, so just be a little bit careful with those end calls. But yeah, that's basically it. That's all I wanted to talk about. Try and break down everything that I know about 9.5 and give you guys all that information so you're ready and set. And, you know, most importantly, so you can have some fun on this 9.5 patch. Once I realized and come to terms with what this patch is and how the Bruiser archetype is kind of dead, at least for the time being, in Soul Lane, but just in general in Smite, I think with all these changes, I actually like the patch a lot now, you know, once I've come to terms with those things. So I've been enjoying it, and I think you guys will enjoy it too, especially for the people out there that didn't like the snowball. I wouldn't say meta, because Smite's always been snowball-y. It's not really just like a meta, just something that exists. But if you guys don't like the fact that you can snowball in Smite, this definitely helps with that. If you want to get to those late game builds, which I do enjoy that, so you're going to enjoy that part. And only one big downside I have with this patch is that it's really hard to kill each other in the early game, and I think that's a big downside. I mean, the most important part of Smite is killing other players, is just the PvP. So the fact that it makes it a lot harder to do that in the early to mid game in this new meta is a little concerning, but overall I'm still having fun with the patch, and I think you guys will enjoy it. And I especially think you guys will enjoy it if you use this information in your games. Because when I first started playing on this new patch, I absolutely hated it, because I thought, I thought there would still be same old Smite with tanks and everything, but it's clearly not the case. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. Enjoy 9.5. If it's tomorrow, if it's today, doesn't really matter. Just have fun with it, and hopefully you guys learn a thing or two from this video. Like I said, I'm still pretty sick, so if you're wondering why I sounded so nasally throughout this whole video, and my mouth's been pretty dry, so yeah, that's basically it. We're getting better though. We're definitely getting better. So yeah, like I said, enjoy 9.5, and I'll see you guys in the next video, hopefully for the Opwash A to Z with a fun new build. All right, catch you guys later. Stay safe and healthy as always. Peace out, guys.